Creativity podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Clare Morgan, fine art printmaker. Please enjoy Clare Morgan. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity podcast. Today I'm here with Clare Morgan, fine art printmaker. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mari.
I am super excited to chat with you about fine art printmaking and creativity and how it shows up for you in your life and in your work. But before we get there, would you mind taking a couple of moments and letting our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yes, of course. So I'm a UK-based artist. I work in the Midlands, and I call myself a fine art printmaker because the art is really led by the messages that are lying behind it. I'm fascinated by our humanity and trying to remind myself, probably as much as the people that view my work, to reconnect with nature, to take our lessons from nature, and to just go with the flow of the seasons. And that shows up in my artwork as portraits mixed with an art deco and art nouveau style with a little bit of a modern twist. I love colour, I love layering, and I love putting strong women in my work as well, because I think I want to be able to connect to people, and I want people to have work in their lives that really makes them feel something and set them up for the day.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I love it. I have loved seeing bits and pieces of your art on Instagram, and that's been super fun. I love how you take a lot of your inspiration or cues from nature. Is that something that has always been with you, or is this kind of a new piece that you're using more in nature to invoke emotion in your work?
That's something that's probably relatively new. So my practice, I studied fine art a long time ago. About 20 years ago, I got into printmaking. I went into teaching and started to really get into that angle and go into leadership and stuff. I lost my way with my art. And as I found my way back into art, I've really wanted to think about it more holistically and how it can have the power to just bring me back to that moment. And I've started to use mindfulness as a way of connecting with the world around me. I went through a period of illness. I had blood cancer. And after that, as I was recovering, I had to go, I was going back to work, and I went to a mindfulness course for about 12 weeks. And just to really deal with that shift in my life from going from being really on to then having a year and a half out and going through all of this stuff, and then you're expected to slot back into the world in the same place that you were before, but you're not the same person. And I think all of this work was me figuring that out, and then the mindfulness came in, and then I started to do outdoor swimming and spend time in nature. And just I'm not a very good meditator, but I'm a really good active meditator. So I can go out for a walk, I can look at things, I can appreciate things, and I get so much from that. I just wanted to inject that into my work. It made sense to me.
How wonderful. And what a journey you've been on, going from illness to health and reclaiming that space. And mindfulness is such an incredible path to walk, and it sounds like it has really informed a lot of the things that you do. So
Yeah.
when you think about being creative, what does it mean to you to be creative?
So creativity to me is about, I've been thinking about this quite a lot, and I think it probably shifts and changes, but right now the most appropriate way of describing it is kind of taking in all this visual information, like opening yourself up to the world around you, really noticing things, looking at things, taking all of that in, and then actually how you synthesize that information, how you pull all those pieces together. And then actually for me as an artist, it's how do I put that into something that communicates that message to other people? How do I use that as a way of connecting and communicating?
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, the creativity is in the absorbing of information and the output of information is
Yeah.
what it sounds like. Yeah.
And I heard a really good talk where somebody described it as divergent thinking. So thinking of lots and lots of possibilities, and then bringing that to convergent thinking, where you take those things and start to make connections and links, and then you pull it together in some way.
Oh, I love that. How fun. And that I think describes the process pretty succinctly. You know, lots of ideas and then how we bring it all together and connect the dots or draw lines between things that are seemingly disconnected.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's
Yeah.
how art works that way anyway. I think if you look at art and the way that looks right now, all it is all of these things throughout art history that are just being pulled back together but combined in different ways. You probably see that in music as well, like in all the different creative endeavors. And I don't think it's exclusive to just arts in a formal sense either. I think that's the way our brain functions when we're doing all kinds of creative things. We've got this bank of information that we can then draw upon to solve the puzzles and problems.
Yeah. Well, speaking of puzzles and problems, I imagine I just I'm not a fine artist, but I have dabbled in art in my life. However, I imagine you can come up against creative challenges, or how do I put things together, or the challenges that you face in your creative endeavors. What are some of those challenges, and then how do you navigate them?
Oh, that's an interesting one, because I would say I don't know if I do necessarily see them as challenges. I see everything as figuring stuff out. And I think it's a mindset thing that even the first probably piece of the puzzle is understanding that maybe creativity and working things out is about the process and not the outcome. And if you can separate those two things, that's a really good mindset to have, because we are in a society that expects us to be productive and make things and have outcomes. But actually, that's not healthy, and not a healthy way to be. That the process is really important. So even if I'm working those things out and it doesn't quite work, I've still gained something from it. So that'll be the first piece. The second piece is perhaps sometimes it's just not that moment. I can go for a period of time where I'm not creating, but that's also important, because again, it's taking lessons from nature. You can't be on all the time. There are times when those flowers will wilt and die, and then they'll go to seed. They'll conserve the energy so that they can get that ready to bloom in the spring. That it's okay if I'm not making something for a while. And then it's just really letting that flow happen. And if I have got something that I have to get done, so I was working on a talk I'm doing at the weekend, I just went for a swim, and I think we're in our brains quite a lot, and I just take yourself out of your brain and bring yourself into your body. I just looked at the water, sort of the bubbles sprinkling on the top of the water surface, and it just took me back into my body, and then it opened up my mind so that then the thoughts just happened without me forcing them. So I think it's just really just knowing what you need. I mean, everyone can tell you that their best thoughts probably come when they're in the shower, or they have those creative things when they're walking. That's not a coincidence. That's because we're not pushing it.
Great reminder to do something that you don't have to think about doing, to let your mind wander and do what it wants to do and come up with solutions or new ideas or ways to connect ideas together that you have. Thank you for that.
Because it's how we're wired. It's like we're all born with it. Every single person is born with that capacity to create. there's a really interesting study, I don't know if you've seen it, that 98% of 5-year-olds have a genius level
Yes.
creativity, and then that drops significantly, so that by the time that people are getting to 30, about an average age of 31, these adults were 2% had genius level creativity, and you just see it drop. And I think it's just because of the world that we're in. It doesn't encourage us to express that creativity, but it's there, and I do think we can exercise it. I think we can.
I 100% believe you can reclaim the 98% creative genius experience. Yeah, and that study is fascinating, from George Land, who originally did it with NASA.
Yes.
To generate a study or a test for astronauts and their creativity.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
You know it.
I do. And the other piece, not related to George Land, but where I think kind of over time things differ from being a 5-year-old to being a 30-plus-year-old, is the number of questions we ask in a day. So like 5-year-olds ask 140 questions a day, and adults ask 4 on average.
Oh my goodness. I mean, things like that just put it into perspective.
Yeah.
Actually, we should be curious. I mean, my business name is Curious Inky Me. Yeah. And the curious comes from when I was doing my mindfulness course, they said you should aim to live with a childlike curiosity. And I was like, I don't want to lose that. That's at the heart of my business. I want to be curious and questioning and figuring things out. Inky was because the ink, and me was because Curious Inky was taken on Instagram. And I also needed, it does reflect me. My work has followed my journey, really. The way it occurs follows my journey.
I love it. But yes, it's that curiosity that continues to allow creativity to show up, or the wonder of inspiration of things that you're doing for the first time or trying new things.
Yes.
And that, I feel like we all as adults can get back to that if we give ourselves permission to ask the questions, be curious, hold that childlike curiosity and wonder for what it is you're doing, and who knows what will happen.
Yeah, and what an amazing way to live. That's like what I'm not perfect, but it's what I aspire to, what I strive for.
I agree. I am not perfect either, and I try and ask more questions throughout my day. But speaking of children, what's your earliest memory of being creative?
Oh, so I used to have colouring books as a child. I mean, I was creative in like all kinds of different ways, like pottering in the shed, using tools, building dens, all these things. But I did have these colouring books, and I would colour the outline of the shape, but not the inside of it, with the colour that the shape would be. Oh. And I was like, this is I like it like this. And everyone would say, why have you not coloured the whole thing in? Like, well, should I like it like this. And I had so many of these colouring books where because the thing that's nice about that, I remember it vividly, but it's just, again, that illustration of the children are so creative because they don't have those boundaries. Nobody's like told them yet, you've got to stay within the lines, or you've got to do things this particular way. You've got no bias, no judgment. You just do things your own way.
Ah, I love that. I'm so curious, having not followed the lines as a kid, how does that show up in adulthood in your current art?
Well, I probably went through a period of because I studied art, and my art education, my art teacher was amazing, so inspiring. The only reason that I continued to do art, but my training was very formal, and it was very much about observation, looking at something and recording it as accurately as it possibly can be. So while I was studying art, I actually wasn't being creative. I wouldn't describe it as creative because it was very much recording. And I battle with this quite a bit because of that knowledge of how things look in a very representational way. I have to really work hard to push myself out of that. And I've ended up going into doing portraiture, which does have to be quite realistic. But it's my creativity comes from putting the other elements in there, and also from using different media. So I'm a printmaker because it's about the process, and the process is then like a bit of a buffer between the starting point and the end point, and the process will also impact how the finished piece is going to look. It reduces my capacity to have control. It stops me from knowing what it's going to look like between the beginning and the end. So I'm kind of almost, the media that I choose and the way that I work are trying to force me to be more creative in lots of ways. And that's why I'm definitely drawn to print. And also print lends itself well to having a beginner's mindset quite frequently, because there's so many processes, and you have to learn each one from scratch. You go into each process with a fresh mind, again, that kind of questioning, how does this work, how does that function, like that you don't have any preconceived expectations of the rules, you can play. And so print in my practice has allowed me to find that creativity where perhaps my more formative years of education in art probably squashed it away a little bit.
That makes a lot of sense. For our listeners who may not be familiar with printmaking, would you mind sharing a little bit about that process and what goes into it?
Oh yeah, so there's as I said, there's so many different types, but there's two kind of main types. Intaglio, which is like etching, where you'd work on a metal plate and you might score into it. You basically, and there's lots of different ways you can do intaglio as well, but essentially you wipe the ink onto the plate, you wipe the ink off, it's held in all the little grooves, textures and recesses, it's put through a press with some damp paper, and then when you lift the paper off, you've got your image. So you don't actually know what you've really got until you lift the paper. It's in reverse, and all those different marks and things you've created will turn out in different ways. There's another family called relief printing, which is what I'm working in at the moment, which includes lino. That's anything with a raised surface. So you carve away the bits you don't want the ink to be on. You put a layer of ink on top, place your paper on there, and you reveal the image. And there's screen printing as well, which is like using stencils and mesh, and so it's a way of creating art in a repeatable way, because you can create multiples of something, but they're all individual, unique works of art, and they're all created through these traditional processes. And there is tons of them, and I've used most of them.
I love that. And thank you for sharing the different types of printmaking and the mediums that you choose to use. Yeah, it's such a fascinating version of art, because it's not one that people do often. It sounds like it's a fairly historical way of making print that only some people choose to do again.
And I was really lucky, because when I finished university, there was a lady that I met that had set up a printmaking studio from scratch, and she trained up in Edinburgh with a really renowned Edinburgh printmaker. So the knowledge and the skills that I got early on when I was starting to learn printmaking were just invaluable. She kind of took me under her wing and cemented my passion for it.
Oh, what a gift. How fantastic is that? Yeah. I mean, I imagine working in the art field and printmaking field that you come across people who really admire the things that you do, and then say, oh, I could never do that, or I am not creative, so I couldn't do that. So how might you encourage those people to find creativity in their life?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one. I do hear that a lot, and I think that's just because we've bought into this myth again of it being output based, of it being this masterpiece by Picasso, or this like musical score by Beethoven, or something extreme. But actually, creativity, it's about the process, and it's just about having a more divergent way of thinking. It's just about thinking about things in unusual ways, breaking down questioning your assumptions, perhaps. So if you're, have you seen that the 9 dot challenge? So there's a puzzle that you can do, and it's 9 dots, 3 across, 3 down, and the challenge is, can you kind of join all those dots together using just 4 lines? And when that test is given to adults, they will only stick to the confines of the dots. But if you give it to children, they will draw beyond those dots. And it's a really nice illustration of how we impose these rules on ourselves. So we think, oh, we're not creative because of all of this expectation that it should look a certain way or be a certain way. But it's the act of it more than anything else.
Yeah. So reminding people to look at things from a different perspective, or how can they see things differently than they currently are, to spark that more divergent thinking in their mind.
And I think one good way of doing that is to put yourself in new situations. Because I'm an artist, but I started to go to improv. And I had no drama background. I never had anything to do with drama. And I don't know what compelled me. I think it's just because I was thinking, I'm just going to try new things. I think I actively wanted to put myself in new situations. And I walked into an improv group, and I had no idea what improv even was at that point. And it was so interesting that it was just people playing. I go to that improv thing, and I'm not expected to perform or do anything. Nothing is expected of me. I went in, I wasn't expected to be you are thinking on your feet, you're saying the words that come out of your mouth when you say them with no judgment, because everybody is just so open to it, and they will just say yes and they'll go with you, and they'll just build on it. And I found putting myself in that situation that was completely alien to me, that allowed those new connections to be made, started to filter through to everything else that I was doing. And I'm not suggesting everybody on this podcast goes to an improv group, but there will be something. I mean, I can't absolutely recommend it, but there'll be something that you just take yourself out of your comfort zone, just do it for the joy of it. And just try it. Maybe go with a friend, and it could be anything. It could be, I mean, I went into tapestry weaving when I was trying to get back into my art, but I didn't want to do art. This was after I'd been very poorly, and I'd obviously had a gap from art. So I had all these expectations of, but if I do art, it's got to look good because it was at this level before. And that was a barrier for me. So I went and did tapestry weaving to get used to the process of just creating without expectation. And that was a way of me getting back into art again. Because I think even people will say, well, you're an artist, of course you're creative. We still have the same challenges. And you still go through those ebbs and flows. And actually, that really worked for me. Just something new.
I love that reminder, and the permission to be a beginner again and try something new that you've never tried. You were talking about finding things that bring you joy or things that you love. What are some of the things that you currently do that bring you joy?
So the improv, 100%, because that is just permission to play as an adult. Just incredible. Outdoor swimming, I love just being in the lake, just connecting with nature. It's like, I don't know, I feel like it's, if you go for a walk in a forest, that's nice, but being in a lake in the middle of the forest is like being in the forest on acid, just full on immersion. It's so good. And then carving, because I obviously love creating art, and my favorite bit of that process is when I've got a plate and I've got my tools and I'm just sitting and carving, and you just go completely into flow. It's like somebody else is doing that carving, because that's just my thing. And I love that.
I love it. Well, This has been such a treat to chat with you. I have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
So that would be the flow. That would just be that grounded in flow. I'm not in my head. Those thoughts aren't whizzing around. I am just completely present. Yeah, I would say that's it.
How beautiful. I love it. And I know what you're talking about. It makes sense to me. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. If
Oh,
people
thank
want to
you.
learn more about your art and where they can see it or find it, how could they go about doing that?
So you can find me at www.curiousinkime.com. I'm on Instagram as Curious Ink Me as well, or you can just search Clare Morgan printmaker, and I should pop up. So yeah, and
Perfect.
feel free to reach out, message me. Like, yeah, it'd be amazing to hear from you.
Yes, and I will put that in show notes so people have easy access. And thank you again for taking the time to chat with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much. I've loved it.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.